Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today. So let's start off talking about Christian Cage. Of course, tonight is the debut premiere episode of AEW Rampage on TNT. The first match we are going to see live tonight on TNT on Rampage is for the Impact World Championship, because the Impact World Champion and the AEW World Champion and the AAA Mega Champion. But tonight, the Impact World Championship is on the line because Kenny Omega, AEW's Kenny Omega, is defending the Impact World Championship against AEW's Christian Cage on an AEW broadcast. The Forbidden Door it's been open for a long time, but now it's been slammed wide open because we've got an Impact World Championship match on AEW Rampage on the premiere episode. Now, we spoke about this at length yesterday, and how that potentially, we do have to consider this, potentially we could see a title change tonight. That is realistic. That is a very realistic possibility that we could be witnessing tonight. You have to factor in, it's the premiere episode of AEW Rampage on TNT. AEW is going to want to do something big. You do also have to question, okay, they're going to be having Christian Cage versus Kenny Omega for the AEW World Championship at All Out on September 5th. Realistically, why would they give us that match on free television and then expect the rest of the world to purchase it on pay-per-view as well? That doesn't make a lot of sense to do that. So something big is planned for tonight. Something very big is planned for tonight. And last night, of course, was Impact Wrestling on Access TV. And as you can see on the picture right there, Christian Cage did appear for the first time on an Impact Wrestling television broadcast in about, this must be 13 years, I think it was. 2008, I think, was the last time he was on an Impact Wrestling broadcast. That was on Spike TV. That was during the Main Event Mafia TNA Frontline angle, right in the early days of the Main Event Mafia. So I think that's 2007. It might be 2007, actually. 2007, 2008, around that period of time. I think it was 2008. And then he went obviously back to WWE. And I know obviously in 2012, he was at Slammiversary as part of that talent exchange between Impact and WWE, which had Ric Flair appear at the Hall of Fame and Christian appear at Slammiversary. But we're talking about a television show. This was the first time that Christian Cage appeared on an Impact Wrestling television show in about 13 years. Even though obviously he wasn't in the Impact Zone, even though obviously it was filmed this past week in Jacksonville because he did an interview with Alex Marvez, of course, AEW interviewer, and he said what you expected him to say. Spoke openly about his past in Impact Wrestling, said that Impact Wrestling was the place where he went to and established himself as a main eventer. Impact Wrestling holds a place near and dear to his heart. Impact Wrestling is the place that he went to and they let him compete for world championships, proved he could main event shows and proved he could be a world champion. He also said, this is very interesting, he also said that he would be on Impact Wrestling next week. He said he would show up at the Impact Zone. Now, I don't know if that's irrespective of what happens when it comes to tonight's Impact World Championship match at Rampage. I'm more leaning into him saying he will show up on Impact Wrestling next week if he wins the Impact World Championship tonight on Rampage. But it's just very, very strange because honestly, realistically, and this has come so out of left field for me because I was always under the impression that Kenny Omega would drop the Impact World Championship to an Impact Wrestling contracted talent, most likely at Bound for Glory. That would be Josh Alexander, Moose, probably the likely contenders to take that championship away from Kenny Omega, but that would be the scenario that they were going in. It would be at Bound for Glory. It would be in the main event of their biggest show of the year. Kenny Omega drops the championship, establishes an Impact Wrestling star. That's what this whole working relationship between Impact and AEW has been leading towards, right? That would make sense. But in reality, now you look at it, that might not be the case. I still do think that Kenny Omega will drop the Impact World title at Bound for Glory in the main event. I just think we're going to go see a detour at this point. The more I think about it, realistically, the more I think about this, I think to myself, I think Christian Cage is going to win the Impact World Championship tonight. I really do. The reason I say that is because otherwise I can't wrap my head around how AEW could justify doing the match tonight on free television, having Kenny Omega win, and then, one, trying to sell the pay-per-view and being like, you paid to watch this match. Well, we've seen it before. And two, actually sell Christian Cage as a credible threat to the AEW World Championship. Because let's face it here, no one thinks Christian Cage is going to win the AEW World Championship. Because that's not going to happen. Nobody thinks that's going to happen. That's, I think, part of the problem with some people buying into this all-out main event in the first place of having Christian Cage as the number one contender. We heard it this past week on Dynamite. Christian Cage said, it's official, I'm challenging you at All Out, and they got a bit of the golf clap from people in the attendance there, and some actual boos because they were a bit like, you know what? This just doesn't feel like a big pay-per-view main event, especially when AEW does 4 pay-per-views a year. This feels like a television special main event. This feels like this could have been the main event for Fyter Fest or for Fight for the Fallen or whatever they want to call them, whatever they want to do. But for All Out, one of their biggest show of the year, that just feels a little bit, maybe just out of place. If anything, it does fit with a big event like the Rampage, the premiere episode of Rampage, the first ever match on Rampage. That fits. So if realistically, you have to consider to yourself, why would they do this match? Why would they expect us to buy the match on pay-per-view after giving it to us on free television? And 2, how could they establish Christian Cage as a credible threat? Because nobody thinks he's going to defeat Omega at the pay-per-view. They do that by having Christian Cage win tonight. He beats Kenny Omega clean, because then you think, actually, he could do this again in Chicago at All Out. He's a credible threat. So they should have Christian Cage beat Kenny Omega clean tonight. 2, they should then add the stakes to make that match All Out a title versus title match. It's for the Impact World Championship and it's for the AEW World Championship. What better way to get under Kenny Omega's skin than take away one of the belts from the belt collector? That makes a lot of sense. That does make a lot of sense. Now, the thing that I know a lot of people, certainly Impact fans, are a bit weary about, and I think a bit hesitant about, and I think justifiably so, is that you've got 2 AEW guys competing for an Impact Championship on an AEW broadcast. If Christian Cage wins, that'll mean the last 2 Impact World Champions were AEW guys. And what does Impact Wrestling get out of that? Where does Impact Wrestling go from there? The ratings for Impact Wrestling haven't been very good recently. Is this a desperate attempt by Impact Wrestling of, we need something to pick up the ratings, we need something to get people talking and watching Impact Wrestling? Maybe that's switching up the belt, moving it to Christian Cage. People like Christian Cage, people know Christian Cage from his time in Impact. Impact fans, lapsed Impact fans, or Impact fans that used to watch the product but don't watch it anymore would be like, hey, Christian Cage is back. Christian Cage is the Impact World Championship again. Impact World Champion again. Maybe I'll watch it. Maybe I'll tune in, and it adds something a bit different. I think there are other issues, frankly, why people aren't watching Impact. I think the spoilers are a massive issue. A massive, massive issue in that. So I don't know if Christian Cage would really solve that problem. Probably not. Would it boost the ratings? Probably. Let's be honest here. Probably. People would tune in to see what would happen for the next 3 weeks as we head to All Out, and then Omega wins the title back and we go back to normal. I think that's a definite possibility. And look, as someone that's watched Impact Wrestling, TNA Wrestling, for years and years and years, all the way back to 2004. I remember watching on 2000, I think my earliest Impact Wrestling or TNA Wrestling memory is in literally 2003, 2004, whenever it was on the Wrestling Channel. Over here in the UK was the first time I ever watched Impact Wrestling. That is the day of like Raven, Clockwork House, Orange of Fun match. I'll get it right in the end. So it goes back, and obviously I'm a huge fan of Christian from the Impact Wrestling days, from the TNA Wrestling days rather, and him being the NWA World Heavyweight Champion and the Christian Coalition with Tomko and AJ Styles and all that kind of stuff. I'm a huge fan of Christian, and I think it would be smart to play on that. Again, it's going to be interesting if last night his appearance in terms of just the pre-tape, the interview he did with Alex Marvez is a one-off, or irrespective of the results tonight on Rampage, it's going to be interesting to see if irrespective of the result, if he's going to show up anyway. For me, again, the more I think about it, truly, the more I think about it, and the more I try and figure out where AEW and Impact are going with this, I'm leaning more towards, I think Christian wins tonight. And I know some people will say, well, why not do a DQ? Why wouldn't it be a DQ? I know it's not an AEW championship, so maybe there's a bit more leeway in this, but AEW just doesn't like to do DQs. And let's face it, this is the first ever match on AEW Rampage. The first ever match. Ending in a DQ, that would be really, really lame. And I don't think AEW would do that. I don't think they would do that. So I think Christian Cage wins the World Championship, the Impact World Championship tonight. I think he beats Kenny Omega as clean as they can. Maybe it's not exactly kill switch in the middle of the ring. Maybe it is. Because if he hits the kill switch 1, 2, 3, that sets up a great false finish. A great false finish for All Out. Because he hits the kill switch again. He beat him last time. 1, 2, kick out, place goes crazy. That's a real possibility too. So I think Christian Cage wins tonight. I think it leads to a 3-week title reign, something like that. I think he shows up in Impact next week. I think he defends the title at Impact Emergence. That makes a load more sense. And we'll touch on Impact Emergence in a second in terms of the contender. I think all of that adds up. So I really wouldn't be surprised. We're going to go live after Rampage tonight, and maybe we'll be talking about a new Impact World Champion. So it's very, very exciting. I'm fascinated to see where they go with this. Truly, I am. But it's great to see Christian back, and maybe it will help out in terms of the ratings too. Now, speaking of Impact Emergence, we now officially know the new number one contender for the Impact World Championship after tonight's Rampage match, because it's none other than Brian Myers. Brian Myers will challenge either Kenny Omega or Christian Cage for the Impact World Championship at Impact Emergence on Friday, August 20th. That's the same night as the First Dance, which is AEW's second Rampage show in the United Center in Chicago, featuring CM Punk. What a night that's going to be. Now, Myers secured his championship opportunity by winning the number one contenders battle royal last night on Impact Wrestling on Access TV. The finish came while Moose and Chris Sabin were renewing their hostilities towards one another. Brian Myers tiptoed in behind them and sent them both over the top rope to win the match. Now, we've known about this result for a while. Of course, it was at the last set of Impact Wrestling television tapings, and when we saw this at the time, it was very surprising, and I didn't really get it. And I criticized it here on the channel. I went, Brian Myers? And the reason I said Brian Myers is because I think those matches against Kenny Omega for Impact Wrestling contracted talent, I think they're gold dust. Not the wrestler, but I think they're so valuable that you need to have Kenny Omega facing off against an Impact Wrestling contracted talent, specifically an up-and-comer you can build the company around. I'm talking about your Ace Austins, your Chris Bays, those ones they were doing with the likes of, with Moose, I thought was a good example. People maybe like Eddie Edwards or Sami Callihan I wasn't massively keen on. I did think the match, obviously, at Slammiversary was very, very good against Omega, but I want to see Omega versus Bay, versus Ace Austin, versus Josh Alexander. That's how you get the talent that's under contract to your company over. So when I saw Brian Myers won the Battle Royal, I was like, really? Kenny Omega versus Brian Myers? Is that the best use of Kenny Omega in an Impact Wrestling ring as the Impact Champion? It didn't make a lot of sense to me. But now, knowing what we know now about tonight with AEW Rampage, that makes a lot of sense to me now. Because I wasn't really behind Kenny Omega versus Brian Myers heel versus heel match. It does nothing for me. But a babyface Christian Cage Impact World Champion versus a Brian Myers, is it really exciting? No, not really. And that's no disrespect to Brian Myers, but I think it makes more sense. It makes a ton more sense to me. Heel versus babyface. Obviously, Christian Cage and Brian Myers do have kind of history, right? Brian Myers as Kurt Hawkins was an Edge head. He was one of the Edge sort of dummies in La Familia with Zack Ryder back in 2008 on SmackDown with Vicky Guerrero and all that kind of stuff. So there is a bit of kind of history there, but it's a solid World Championship defense for Christian Cage, isn't it? If he wins the title tonight, he then defends it against Brian Myers. He has a successful title defense, so his Impact World Championship reign doesn't feel meaningless. He feels like a proper defending world champion. It's a great story for someone that at the beginning of this year only got cleared. We never thought we'd see him wrestle again. Returns at the Royal Rumble, signs of AEW, becomes the Impact World Champion, returns to Impact, defends the championship. That's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty cool redemption story for Christian Cage involving all of that. So Christian Cage versus Brian Myers makes loads more sense to me than Brian Myers versus Kenny Omega. Now, I don't know if that's the avenue that they're going to go down. I really don't know, but that makes more sense to me. Am I interested in seeing it? To be honest with you, I'm probably more interested in seeing Christian Cage versus Brian Myers than I am seeing Kenny Omega versus Brian Myers. I think so. I think whoever is the champion wins that match. Brian Myers isn't winning the Impact World Championship. That's not happening. But I think that's interesting. And like I said, now that Brian Myers result does make a bit more sense to me. If they go with the Christian Cage route. But again, all of this stuff is just pointing in that direction of Christian Cage is going to win. I really think that's going to be the case now. Could be wrong. Have been wrong before. Keira Hogan last night made her final appearance for Impact Wrestling on last night's Impact on Access TV episode. Now, following their loss to Jordan Grace and Rachel Ellering last week, Tasha Steelz ended their partnership as Fire and Flavor, bringing in independent star Savannah Evans, who laid a beatdown on Keira Hogan while Steelz stood by. This week, Keira Hogan came out to the ring and called out Steelz and Evans, but instead of those two showing up, the undead bride herself, Su Yung, and the newly reimagined Kimberly, as I guess the undead bridesmaid, made, came out and dragged Keira Hogan to the back. This was their way of concluding Keira Hogan's time with the company and writing her off of television. So again, we've known this one's coming for a while, and we already know, realistically, Keira Hogan's next move in the world of professional wrestling, because Keira Hogan was backstage at AEW Dynamite a couple of weeks ago, and then she returned to AEW this week on Wednesday night. She made her in-ring debut against former AEW Women's World Champion Hikaru Shida in a match that will air Monday on AEW Dark Elevation on YouTube. Now, as of right now, at the time of recording, we don't know if Keira Hogan has signed a contract with AEW. I would probably say no. These things take time. AEW, for certainly specific certain talent, will hand out a contract straight away. If they're a high-profile talent like a Malachi Black, they're not doing that with no contracts. With a Keira Hogan, I would suspect they'll wait and see. They'll have her work Dark Elevation, maybe an Impact AEW Dynamite taping or a Rampage match or something like that. And then they'll probably end up giving out a contract to her. Like I said before, I always expected AEW to be the most likely destination for Keira Hogan. The reason I said that is because she's just, I couldn't see her going to WWE because of the heat there. It's documented the Sasha Banks issue with the blue hair and all that kind of stuff. So that was very, very, very unlikely. I felt that AEW was the most likely destination because that's where her partner is. Her partner is Diamante. Diamante was in a tag team in AEW with Ivelisse before Ivelisse was released from the company due to behavior issues. So there's an in there. There's an in already into that company. And I felt that was the most likely outcome. So no more Keira Hogan on Impact Wrestling. Last night was her final appearance. She had a great career, a real great career. For two-time Impact Knockouts Tag Team Champion, was one half of the first Knockouts Tag Team Champions once the titles were reinstated into Impact Wrestling earlier this year. So Fire and Favor were a great tag team, and it's going to be interesting to see how well Keira Hogan does in AEW going forward. Speaking of the knockouts as well, Madison Rayne's back already in Impact Wrestling. That retirement didn't last that long, did it? Because Madison Rayne returned to Impact on last night's episode of Impact on Access TV. The former 5-time Knockouts champion interfered in Tenille Dashwood's and Taylor Wilde's match, helping Dashwood pick up the victory against Wilde. Now, Rayne's last appearance on Impact Wrestling was 7 months ago on the pre-show of Hard to Kill, where she publicly announced her retirement from Impact. So her retirement lasted 7 months. That's got to be a record, right? Even Terry Funk's looking at that one going, that wasn't very long. Before leaving, Rayne did double duty as an in-ring performer occasionally, but the majority of the time she was a color commentator alongside her husband, Josh Matthews. Now, as of recording right now, it's unclear if Madison Rayne will return to the company full-time again or if this was a one-off. I would probably say that it's not a one-off. I think she might be in a managerial capacity. Back earlier this year, she went on record saying she's retired from in-ring competition, but she said that a future possibility of return to the ring would maybe be possible. It's a never say never. She said, quote, "I mean, I'm happy with my last match because Jessica Havoc and Nevaeh were in it, but you know, when you put it in as many years as I did, I think in a perfect world, when all of the stars align, you get to write your own happy ending, right? And I didn't. I shouldn't say I didn't get to do that because Impact 100% would let me, but like, it was time for me to go when I went." Well, she's back already. So I think she'll probably be back for one more match. I really do. As what that will be, I don't know. But her retirement lasted 7 months. So again, that's got to be some kind of record, right? Truly, it's got to be some kind of record. That's short by retirement pro wrestling lengths anyway. But Madison Rayne's back, and we'll have to wait and see what happens going forward. I think maybe it will lead to one more match. We spoke about Impact Emergence earlier. Another match has been announced for Impact Emergence, and Stevemacklin is set to collide with P.T. Williams at the Impact Wrestling Emergence event on August 20th on Impact Plus. Of course, that's next Friday. P.T. Williams has taken issue with Macklin's post-match assaults as of late after going to a double countout with Trey Miguel on a recent Before the Impact episode. Macklin tried to beat down Miguel with a chair, but P.T. Williams came to Miguel's aid. The following week, Macklin defeated Jarcy and looked to brutalize him with a chair, but Williams yet again made the save. So this match has been added to Impact Emergence. Stevemacklin wins, obviously. I mean, we don't know that for a fact, but Stevemacklin is winning this match. I've been very impressed with Stevemacklin. I like the gimmick, like I said before. It's obviously a play on the Punisher. If you're a fan of the Punisher comics or the Punisher films or the Punisher television series, you know that's what he's going for. The whole former serviceman turns into a sort of a violent mercenary. I think it's a great gimmick, and I think he's done very well. But he wins this match. No doubt about that. And finally, Melina makes her in-ring debut for Impact Wrestling next week. This was announced last night, just 1 week before she faces, of course, the Impact Knockouts champion Deonna Purrazzo for the Knockouts Championship at MWA Empower. I would assume she wins this one, but it's going to be very interesting to see. I don't think she wins the Knockouts Championship at NWA Empower, but look, anything's possible, and it'll be great to see Melina compete inside of an Impact Wrestling ring for the first time. But look, guys, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all these Impact Wrestling news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about Impact Wrestling, AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.